Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of my What If Mars Was Habitable series. As we can see here, I made a 2D map of what is believed to be what Mars' surface would look like if it were habitable. How the series is going to work is that there are going to be two intelligent species, which I teased in the trailer. The first one being a human-like alien species that we will call the humanoids, and the second one being a dragon-like species that we will call the dragonoids. I will talk more about them later, but for now, all you need to know is that they are both intelligent species like humans, and that in the series they will be forming civilizations that will fight wars and stuff like that. It will be kind of like Adis Pro's What If Civilization Started Over series, if you have watched that already, but instead of taking place on Earth, it will take place on Mars. Before we begin, we will have to make a few assumptions. The first one is that in order to make Mars habitable, we will need to make it keep its magnetosphere that it lost about 4 billion years ago, which caused it to lose its atmosphere to solar winds, which would mean change in what Mars' core is composed of. Next, we need to assume that change in what Mars' core is made up of during its formation doesn't affect anything else in the formation of the solar system. And last of all, we need to assume that life spawns due to chemical reactions in the ocean, which we haven't yet discovered, instead of some other unknown way because we don't actually know how life forms. So with all that in mind, we can now start the scenario. With a different core, Mars continues to be a habitable world. If Mars didn't already have life, then eventually single-celled organisms would start to form, which would then turn into multiple-celled organisms, and eventually into sea creatures. In time, a lot of those sea creatures will then begin to migrate onto Mars' surface and then evolve over time. Moving over to this area of the map is Olympus Mons, which is the largest known volcano in the solar system. In our timeline, there were many times that it had erupted, and with Mars still being habitable, this pattern would continue. Multiple ginormous eruptions would happen over the course of millions of years, which would cause many massive extinction events, as well as completely changing the landscape of this area of Mars, as some of the lava that erupts from Olympus Mons would go into the shallow part of Mars' ocean, which you can see on this 2D map that I used to stencil the 2D map of Mars, and in the end the map will look something like this. All of this new land that has formed will be extremely fertile and will be important later on in this series, so stay tuned for that. Through all of the mass extinction events and the ice ages caused by Olympus Mons, two intelligent species will emerge, which are the humanoid species and the dragonoid species that I was talking about earlier. Throughout the humanoid species' existence, they have always lived closely in tribes similar to those that existed in caveman times, while the dragonoids spread out much more across Mars' surface. Around that time, the last ice age happened in human history, which led to the humans becoming the apex predators of Earth and eventually establishing civilizations. Olympus Mons will erupt for the final time before becoming dormant, which will cause one last ice age. Most of the humanoids already live by the equator area, so there's no need for them to migrate, as their area is still relatively warm, other than the fact that they now have to deal with winters. But the dragonoids, on the other hand, do have to migrate to where the humanoids are living. From sea creatures to land creatures. Now the thing about Mars is that it only has about 38% of Earth's gravity because it's on a much smaller planet. So on Mars, the most dominant life forms are creatures that can fly. On Earth, since we have a lot more gravity compared to Mars, there isn't that many species that can naturally fly, with only ones who can being mainly birds. But on Mars, things are different, and there are now many different types of flying animals who have many unique ways of flying, which we cannot even comprehend here on Earth, because it's way easier to do on Mars compared to Earth. On Earth, there are only about 5 main types of flying animals compared to many other types of animals on land, but on Mars, it will switch with there being way more flying animals than land animals, because it's much easier for flying animals to survive on Mars. So on Mars, you probably can't even look up in the sky without seeing at least one flying creature. So with all of that out of the way, let's start this scenario. So over here we have 4 humanoid tribes. Because of the migrations due to the eruption of Mount Olympus, the dragonoids start to struggle to find food because all the flying species species are more close together towards their crater, and a lot of them are more stronger than them, so they end up being hunted more, which is the same for the humanoids. Eventually, one of the Dragonoid tribes makes a new home near the four tribes in this area, and out of desperation for food, takes some portions of the food that the humanoids have gotten for themselves, which causes their population to start to decline over time. One day, a young humanoid, who will just give a random name, which will be Hiccup. No reason why I chose it, I just decided to name him that. Anyways, his town is raided by the new Dragonoid tribe nearby, and he shoots one of the Dragonoids down with a bow and arrow. He then goes out and finds the Dragonoid and is about to kill it, but then has a change of heart and decides to nurse it back to health. They end up forming what would be the first symbiotic relationship between a Dragonoid and a humanoid. With each other, they keep this secret from their tribes, and over time they learn how to communicate with each other basically with their bioluminescence, and the humanoid even learns how to ride the Dragonoid, and they learn how to hunt other land and flying species together, which makes them both the best hunters in their tribes and very well respected. Over time, the humanoid and the Dragonoid tell their closest friends about their friendship, and they end up introducing them to each other, and their friends also end up forming symbiotic relationships with each other. Unfortunately, the chief ends up finding out about the Dragonoids, and then Hiccup and his friends are captured for treason when they weren't with the Dragonoids. When in captivity, Hiccup and his friends are tortured until one of them gives up the location of the Dragonoid's nest, and the chief then meets with all the other tribes who have also had to deal with the Dragonoids to rally them to join him in fighting the Dragonoids, in which they all end up agreeing to. When word gets back to Hiccup and his friends, they then do a big risk and are able to successfully break out of captivity and meet up with the Dragonoids at their meeting place, where they have loyally come to at least once a day to check to see if they have returned since they have been captured. The humanoids then warn the Dragonoids about the four tribes' plan to attack their nest, and they then decide that they need to rally supporters from both sides to fight for their cause. They are both able to get back to the tribes and are successfully able to rally up a small army and then get them all to their meeting place at this spot right over here, and then train the humanoids and the Dragonoids how to work and fight together, as the Dragonoid and the humanoid tribes are gearing up to fight each other. Eventually, the four tribes in the Dragonoid nest have a confrontation and start fighting each other. The humanoids have a basic navy that's made up of fishing boats, and they're able to build it up and are able to successfully do a naval landing into the Dragonoid territory, with the humanoids vastly outnumbering the Dragonoids, but the Dragonoids having the flying advantage. The battle is very even out until the Dragonoids and the humanoids' small army swoops in and third parties them. They start their attack by taking down all the tribe's navies, reducing it to this little spot over here, while also taking down the tribe's land forces in their land invasion, while simultaneously attacking the Dragonoids on the red team in the air. Eventually, the leaders from all five tribes are eventually killed in battle, which basically ends the war. Hiccup and his friends and the Dragonoids then rally up support from all their tribes for the Dragonoids and the humanoids to put aside the differences and form a symbiotic partnership. Since they're all very popular because of all the food they've brought back from hunting, a lot of people enthusiastically agree, and then all five tribes unite under Hiccup and his Dragonoids rule. Because the humanoids have now gained the ability to fly, they are now able to hunt flying animals much more effectively with their bows and arrows and spears. And because of that, they also expand their land control, so although the actual civilization they have is located here, they actually control this much land, which they usually hunt in. Back in the core territory, Hiccup establishes control over it and decides to name the new union of the tribes Burke. Again, no reason why. He then establishes an oligarchy with his friends and their Dragonoids with him as the leader of it, and consolidates his control over the tribes, and decides to make this spot over here the capital of Burke, which is also where the Dragonoids and the humanoids first establish contact with each other. Eventually, the humanoids and the Dragonoids start to integrate their societies together, and the chief of Burke starts to get the humanoids and the Dragonoids to eventually form symbiotic relationships with each other for hunting, while also forming a new united language to communicate with each other, which also includes sign languages used similar to what humans use with horses but instead for flying. After this happens, the first true Martian civilization has been created, and the humanoids and the dragonoids then start to expand their control and even peacefully integrate some nearby dragonoid nest and humanoid tribes in their new civilization. They first start their expansion in the northeast coast area and then move down south towards these lakes and take most of them over, while also simultaneously expanding in the west around this lake. And as you can see on this world map, this is how much they have expanded to. During Berg's expansion, other dragonoid and humanoid tribes start to hear about the first dragonoid-humanoid hybrid civilization and start to peacefully form similar civilizations nearby. The first one will be this purple civilization that pops out over here that will expand to these borders over the course of about a year, followed by this blue country that will pop up over here, and then after its foundation it will expand into this peninsular area over the course of a year. There will also be this lime green team that will form at the southern part of this island, this part of the peninsula that the purple team inhabits, as well as this southern island. And then last of all, over by the yellow team, we've got this orange team that's gonna form right in this area over here, which is gonna be the last country that's gonna be forming in this video. Then we also have to give all these countries capitals, so we're gonna have a capital here, a capital here, a capital here, and a capital here. And then this is where all the capitals will be, and as you can see, they all look like weird eyes, so off camera I changed the color a bit to this. And last of all, we need to talk about the time scale of the course that all these events have occurred. Olympus Mons, the volcano that caused the Ice Age in Mars, erupted about 2 centuries before Berg formed, and this all takes place around the end of the last Ice Age that happened on Earth, which lasted for 100,000 years. But this ice age will only last about 2,000 years and end around the same time our ice age did on Earth. Whether or not that will have consequences, and if these aliens meet up with Earthlings one day, we'll have to see how the series goes. So if you like the series, then please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, as I have plenty of amazing videos planned. I may not be doing a part 2 to I may be doing a what if the great powers decolonize properly video before the high school is doing an alternate Congress of Vienna video, simply because of scheduling issues with me and Gary, as well as lack of interest in that video. I'm looking forward to doing the what if great powers decolonize properly video, which is an idea that I came up with when I was working on the what if everything went perfect for the USA video, so stay tuned for that. If any of you guys have any scenarios that you want to see on the list, then leave a comment below of what you'd like to see and I might consider doing it. And yeah, I think that is it regarding channel news. I'm excited to see where this new series will go. I'm kind of aiming towards Adis Pro's style of his What If Civilization Started Over series, but just on Mars instead. So we'll see how that works out. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. So as always,